My name is Sarah. I'm 82 years old, and today I want to share a story that changed the course of my entire life. You know how it is when memory starts to waver, don't you? We lose hold of yesterday's little moments. Yet the past days, etched within us, vivid, as if it unfolded just hours ago. It all began on a Sunday afternoon, one of those unbearably sweltering days, when even drawing breath felt like labor. It was July 1957, not long after I turned 18. I can still see it, the ceiling fan spinning lazily above my head in my mother's house. The oppressive heat thick enough to cloud every thought. The whole family had come together one of those gatherings. You know, well-distant uncles, barely familiar cousins, relatives who seemed to materialize out of thin air once every few years. We lived in a modest home on the outskirts of Chicago. Nothing grand, but a neat little nest tended with love. My mother, bless her, worked tirelessly. She was a seamstress, taking in projects so she could stay home and care for me. I grew up to the comforting rhythm of her old Singer sewing machine tick, 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 lulling me to sleep each night. I learned early on to keep myself quietly occupied, crafting little rag dolls by her side. That afternoon, Aunt Dorothy Shirley, you know the kind, the elderly relative with failing eyesight who remembers things no one else does, began rummaging through a battered cardboard box. "Let's look at some photos from your childhood," she said, her smile warm and knowing, and she pulled out thick, time-worn albums, their pages yellowed and musty with age. "I bet you too have hidden somewhere similar treasures, those black and white photographs heavy with forgotten stories." And then it happened. One photograph changed everything. Here's your Grandpa George, who worked the railroads, and Aunt Linda, who moved to New York and never came back. Then wait. Aunt Dorothy lifted a particular photo. Her clouded eyes widened, and a soft, bewildered smile crossed her face. The kind only the elderly wear when past and present blur into one. "Sarah?" she said, pointing to a young woman in the picture. "You are the very image of your mother." I stared at the faded photograph of a woman I had never seen before. In the corner, scrawled in pen, were the simple words, "Elizabeth, 1956. A strange chill ran down my spine, because the woman in the picture wasn't the same as the woman standing beside me, my mother, whose face had turned ashen, her hands trembling ever so slightly. "Dorothy's just confused," my mother said quickly, reaching for the album with a forced smile. "She doesn't know what she's saying anymore." But Aunt Dorothy, with the stubbornness only age can sharpen, shook her head. "I know exactly what I'm saying. The girl is the very image of Elizabeth O. Same eyes, that same little half-smile." A heavy silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. It seemed no one dared breathe. My cousin Greg suddenly found great interest in studying the table. Aunt Margaret cleared her throat awkwardly and slipped off to the kitchen under the pretense of needing more coffee. I sat frozen, my gaze locked on the photograph, feeling the ground beneath me shift and crack. "Who is Elizabeth?" I asked, though in my heart I already sensed the answer would change everything. My mother stood, smoothing her skirt with a nervousness I recognized too well. "Let's not get into this now." "Who wants some cornbread?" she offered brightly. But the words sounded hollow. Something inside me had already stirred awake, a question planted too deep to ignore. The rest of the gathering blurred past me, while others chatted and laughed. I remained elsewhere, my mind circling back to that closed album resting innocently on the shelf, guarding its secrets. Maybe you're wondering, how could she not have known? But life isn't that simple. When we're young, We accept the world as it's presented to us. She was my mother because she always had been. She taught me to walk, wiped my tears, sat by my bedside through fevers, cheered me on my first day of school. I never had cause to doubt, but now, pieces I had long ignored began to slot into place, the uneasy glances whenever I asked about my father, the missing baby photographs, the persistent sense during family gatherings that an invisible thread of tension hung between them just out of reach. The night dragged on. Though the house eventually grew quiet, sleep would not come. I lay staring at the cracked ceiling, sifting through memories, searching for signs I had missed. It was then I heard it, the soft sound of my mother crying in the kitchen. I slipped from bed, the old floorboards creaking underfoot, and made my way toward her. There she sat, bathed in the dim glow of the overhead light, holding a small, worn photograph between trembling fingers. She tried to hide it as I entered, but it was too late. "Who is Elizabeth?" I asked again, my voice softer now, but no less determined. There was no running from it anymore. My mother let out a long, shuddering sigh, a sound so deep it seemed to rise from her very soul. "Sit down, sweetheart," she said at last, her voice breaking. "It's time you knew. Before we go further, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Try to watch the videos as long as possible. By watching more often, YouTube will promote these stories to a larger audience, grow your channel, and bring you more interesting things. Let's start now. If you see your mom, your grandma, or even yourself in this story, don't hesitate. Type 12. Afraid you would seek your father, who was weak and irresponsible. Afraid of losing you, all I had left of my beloved sister. We remained there, crying together, embracing until sunrise. Me processing that the woman I had always called mother was actually my aunt. That my biological mother died, giving birth to me. That I possessed a history unknown to me. But as daylight broke, something became crystalline. The love Emily had given me throughout those years was the truest love possible. She had sacrificed her own life for a promise to her sister. She had been a mother in the deepest sense. That morning, exhausted but determined, I asked Emily to show me everything she had preserved from my biological mother. That's when she retrieved a small wooden keepsake box from deep within her wardrobe. This belonged to her. I never found the courage to open it. With trembling hands, I accepted that small wooden box. It was modest, with carved flowers adorning the lid, the kind purchased at craft fairs. The scent of aged wood mingled with faint jasmine, probably stored with some sachet for years, giving me goosebumps. "I bought this box for Elizabeth on her 15th birthday," Emily said, her gaze lost in memories. She kept her most treasured possessions here. I opened it slowly, like someone fearing what might lie within. Inside was a silk scarf yellowed by time, letters tied with a faded blue ribbon, an almost depleted lipstick, a small seashell, and a sealed envelope bearing my name. "She wrote this for you," Emily explained softly. "In her final days, when she was already very weak, she wrote it and asked me to give it to you when you were older. I never found the right moment. I took the envelope as if handling something sacred. The paper was thin, brittle at the edges, the delicate, slanted handwriting forming my name. For Sarah, my daughter. I couldn't open it immediately. I needed time, courage, First, I lifted the silk scarf to my face. Even after so many years, it retained a faint scent I can't describe. Perhaps Elizabeth's perfume. Was this scarf hers? I asked, running my fingers over the soft texture. Yes, she wore it around her neck when she sang, called it her lucky charm. Emily smiled nostalgically. It was like her trademark. Everyone who watched her perform in New York bars mentioned this blue silk scarf. I unrolled the letters, but couldn't read them then. They were correspondence between Elizabeth and the man I now knew as my biological father, a musician named David. What was he like, I asked, holding a small, faded photo showing a young man with dark hair and a broad smile. Cradling a guitar. Emily hesitated. I could tell she was carefully choosing her words. David was charming. He played guitar extraordinarily well, had a beautiful voice, too. He knew exactly what to say to win people over. When he and Elizabeth performed together, it gave you goosebumps. Everyone thought they would go far, but he abandoned her, I said, feeling an old, yet somehow new anger towards someone I'd never known. People are complex. Sarah. He was very young, early 20s. He dreamed of building a career, touring the country, becoming a famous artist. A child wasn't in his plans. She paused, sighing. I'm not defending his actions, but I don't want you carrying hatred. We don't know what happened to him afterward. I continued exploring the box and discovered a yellowed newspaper clipping. It was a small advertisement for a musical performance at a jazz bar called Midnight Blue in New York City. Elizabeth's name appeared alongside David's and two other musicians forming a band. The date was 1956, just over a year before my birth. So she did fulfill her singing dream, at least briefly. Yes, for a time. Emily answered. She would secretly send these clippings to me, since our father had forbidden even mentioning her name at home. She said she was happy that everything would work out. Her voice faltered. If only I had known how it would end. Day was breaking when I finally mustered the courage to open my biological mother's letter. My hands trembled so severely I could barely break the envelope's seal. Emily noticed and asked if I wanted privacy. No, I answered. I want you with me. The paper was thin, yellowed, with time spots. The delicate but trembling handwriting in places revealed the writer's debilitated state. My dear daughter Sarah, by the time you read this letter, I will have been gone for many years. I don't know how old you will be or what kind of person you will have become. But in my heart, you will always be the little miracle I now carry within me. I don't have much time, so I need to be direct. I know I won't survive your birth. The doctors haven't told me. But I feel it. My body is too weak. But I'm not afraid of death. I'm only afraid that you'll grow up without knowing how much you were loved from the very first moment. It's strange to love someone we don't even know yet, isn't it? But I love you more than anything in this life, and that's why I'm at peace with what will happen. It's worth giving my life for yours. I want you to know that I don't regret anything. I ran away from home for love of music and freedom, and I found a love that, though brief, gave me you. Your father, David, had dreams too big. He wasn't ready for a family. Don't blame him. We are all imperfect. We all make mistakes. Emily, my dear sister, promised to take care of you as if you were her own, and I know she will keep this promise. She has the most generous heart I've ever known. Love her as your true mother, because that's what she will be to you in all the ways that matter. There is something else I need to tell you, something that only Emily knows. You are not alone in this world. my daughter. You have a twin brother. When I discovered I was expecting 2 babies, it was as if the world had collapsed even more. How would I, alone and abandoned, care for 2 children? It was the hardest decision of my life, but I gave your brother up for adoption as soon as I knew I wouldn't survive. A good family who couldn't have children took him in. They promised to love him and give him everything I couldn't. His name is Michael. He was born a few minutes before you. He has a small birthmark on his right wrist, like a half moon. I don't know if you will ever meet, but I wanted you to know of his existence. Perhaps one day, fate will reunite what I had to separate. Live intensely, my Sarah. Sing, dance, love. Don't be afraid to follow your dreams, but always remember the value of those who truly love you, with all the love a mother can feel. Elizabeth P. S. The blue scarf is for you. Wear it when you need courage. It worked for me for years. When I finished reading, speech failed me. Silent tears fell, staining the paper I held so carefully. Emily was also crying, embracing herself as if seeking self-comfort. I have a brother, I finally managed to say, my voice nearly gone. A twin brother, and you never told me. Emily's face contorted with pain and guilt. I didn't know how. It was difficult enough to tell you about Elizabeth, and then, where would we look for him? Back then, there were no DNA tests, no internet to find people. He was a baby given to another family with no record connecting you. Do you know who took him? Which family was it? I know very little. Emily replied softly. It was a couple from the north. I think from Vermont or New Hampshire. They couldn't have children. The husband was a doctor. He helped with the delivery. When it became clear she wouldn't survive, this doctor offered to adopt one of the babies since I would be taking you. He said he could provide a good life, an education that I alone might struggle to offer for 2 children. And you decided that, just like that, to separate siblings, Sarah. Understand, those were terrible hours. Elizabeth was dying. 2 newborns had just arrived. I had no means to raise 2 babies alone. We had no option. At least it didn't seem like we had. I sat silently for a long time, processing everything. A brother, a twin, someone sharing my blood. Born the same day from the same womb, whom I'd never known. Someone perhaps at that very moment, living his life miles away, unaware of my existence. What's his full name? Do you know? Emily shook her head. Michael, just that. The couple would register him with their surname and the doctor's name. The wife's doctor, Thompson, Richard Thompson. If I'm not mistaken, the wife? I don't remember, it was so long ago. Sweetheart, the sun was already high when we finally realized how long we'd been immersed in these revelations. Emily prepared strong coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table, each lost in thought. What will you do now? She asked, breaking the silence. I looked at the blue scarf still between my fingers. I'm going to find him. I'm going to find my brother. Emily didn't try to dissuade me. Perhaps knowing it would be futile, or perhaps because deep down she felt it was right. It will be difficult, you know, almost impossible. I don't care. He's my family, the only blood relative I have left. I am your family, Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. And I saw fear in her eyes. Fear that now knowing the truth, I might love her less or even leave her. I took her hands in mine hands that had cradled me, fed me, dried my tears throughout my entire life. You will always be my mother. Nothing changes that. But I need to find Michael. I need to at least try. That day, I made a decision that would alter my life's course for the next several years. I had no idea how to begin this search, but I was determined. I had a brother somewhere, and I would find him. Folks, I want to pause here to say something. Never underestimate truth's power, however painful. It liberates us. I spent 18 years not knowing who I truly was, and when I finally discovered it, it was like finding the missing piece of a puzzle. If this story touches your heart somehow, share it with someone you love. Perhaps they're also seeking answers to questions they don't even know they have. In the weeks that followed, I began my search, even without knowing where to start. It was 1957. No internet, no DNA testing, none of today's tools. All I had was a name, McKayland, the vague information that a doctor named Richard Thompson from the north had adopted him. First, I tried birth records. I went to the registry office where I had been registered, but found no information about a second baby. This didn't surprise me. Obviously, his registration would have occurred elsewhere, probably in the doctor's city of residence. Meanwhile, my relationship with Emily, whom I still found difficult not to call mother, experienced ups and downs. There were moments of intense closeness when we cried together, remembering Elizabeth through her letters and photos, and moments of painful distance when resentment for those years of secrecy resurfaced. "Why did you never display her photo in the house?" I asked one day, as we sorted through Elizabeth's belongings. "Why pretend she never existed?" Emily sighed, her shoulders drooping beneath that question's weight. Initially, it was fear my father would discover the truth. Later, I suppose I grew accustomed to the secret. And maybe I feared that if you knew about her from a young age, you wouldn't view me as your mother anymore. It was an honest answer, and I couldn't blame her. The fear of losing someone we love can lead to decisions difficult to understand. There were months of frustrating attempts. I wrote to hospitals in the north, to medical boards, seeking any trace of Dr. Richard Thompson. Most didn't respond. Those who did said they couldn't provide personal information. Until one day, nearly surrendering, I received a letter from a former employee of a Philadelphia hospital. He remembered a Dr. Thompson who had worked there briefly before relocating to Boston. He wasn't certain it was the same person, but provided the address of a colleague who might know more. It was my first real thread of hope. I wrote to this other doctor, who took almost 2 months to reply. But when the response arrived, my heart raced as I opened the envelope. Yes, I knew Dr. Richard Thompson. We worked together in Philadelphia for several years. He moved to Boston in 1958 with his wife and adopted son. I lost contact afterward, but heard he opened a private practice there. I'm sorry I can't help more. An adopted son. It had to be my brother. Boston, 1958. A city I'd never visited, in a state I knew only from geography textbooks. It felt like traveling to another country. I had just turned 19 and had never left Chicago alone. The bus journey was long and exhausting, almost 3 days on the road, with stops in cities I didn't know existed. I remember gazing out the window, watching the landscape gradually transform. Fields becoming greener, climate milder, wondering, did he grow up beneath this same sky Emily didn't want me to go? She tried every persuasion, saying it was dangerous, that I was too young, that I might face disappointment. But deep down, I think she feared what I might discover, or, worse, that I might find this other piece of my family and decide not to return. I'll always come back home. Mom, I said at the bus station, deliberately using that word, Mom knowing how much it meant to her, and saw tears in her eyes mixed with a relieved smile. The meager savings from my job as a neighborhood sewing shop assistant barely covered the cheapest hotel. That's where I stayed, in a simple room overlooking a restaurant's back area. Cooking odors permeated through cracks, but I didn't mind. I was so close now. So close to my brother. On my first day, I wandered the city inquiring about Dr. Richard Thompson. Nobody seemed to know him, a small city. Yet not that small. I visited the main hospital, but they said no doctor by that name worked there. Almost giving up, I entered a downtown pharmacy. The pharmacist, an elderly gentleman with white hair and reading glasses perched on his nose, looked at me curiously when I asked, Dr. Thompson. Yes, his private clinic is on Beacon Street, about 3 blocks from here. A yellow building with a blue sign. You can't miss it. My heart raced. After so much searching, such a simple answer. I thanked him and left, nearly running, stopping only to ask a newspaper vendor for directions. The building matched the pharmacist's description perfectly. Yellow with a blue sign reading, Dr. Richard Thompson Clinic, General Medicine and Pediatrics. I stood across the street, watching, lacking courage to cross. What if he refused to see me? What if he denied everything? Worse yet, what if my brother didn't want to know I existed? I took a deep breath, clutched Elizabeth's blue scarf in my dress pocket. I brought it as a sort of talisman and crossed the street. The receptionist, a woman approximately my age with her hair in a tight bun, regarded me with an automatic smile. Can I help you? I would like to speak with Dr. Thompson. It's a personal matter. Do you have an appointment? No, but it's very important. Please. She hesitated, noting my simple appearance, the slightly wrinkled dress from traveling, my nervous demeanor. The doctor is with a patient now, but if you can wait, I'll see if he can see you between appointments. Your name? Sarah? Sarah Santos? That was my surname. Emily's surname. The only one I'd known. Please wait over there. I sat in one of the waiting room chairs, my heart pounding so forcefully I thought others could hear it. There was a lady with a small child, an elderly man reading a newspaper, and a pregnant woman dozing in the corner. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, completely unaware of the turmoil within me. Time seemed suspended. I picked up an old magazine, but couldn't focus on the words. I checked the wall clock so frequently that the receptionist began watching me suspiciously. Then the office door opened. A middle-aged man with graying temples wearing a white coat appeared, escorting an elderly patient out. He smiled gently at her, provided some instructions, then surveyed the waiting room. Who's next, Clarice? The receptionist indicated the lady with the child, but added, Doctor, this young woman would like to speak with you. She says it's a personal matter. His eyes fell on me, curious, evaluating. Nothing about him seemed familiar. There was no immediate connection. He was just a stranger, observing me with polite indifference. I'm sorry, but I'm in the midst of appointments. If it's about a consultation, my secretary can schedule one. I stood, my legs trembling. Please, doctor, it's about Michael. His expression instantly transformed. I saw shock, then a cautious, defensive look. Clarice, take the next patient. Miss Sarah, please come into my office. I followed him through the door, feeling other patients' curious gazes on my back. The office was impeccable dark wooden desk, diplomas on the wall, an examination couch in the corner. He indicated a chair and sat behind his desk, hands folded before him. "What do you know about Michael?" he asked without preamble. I swallowed hard. "I know he's my brother, twin brother. I know that you and your wife adopted him when our biological mother, Elizabeth, died in childbirth. Dr. Thompson stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to see through me, to verify my truthfulness. Then, slowly, he opened a desk drawer and extracted a photograph. He pushed it toward me. It showed a young man, perhaps a year younger than he would be now, about 18 years old, tall, dark-haired, with a shy smile. He stood beside a middle-aged woman, probably the doctor's wife, in front of what appeared to be a university facade. "This is him," said the doctor, not as a question but a statement. "This is Michael." I took the photo with trembling hands. It was like looking into a strange mirror. We weren't identical. He had a more square jaw, a slightly narrower nose, but the similarities were undeniable. The same eyes, the same face shape. He has been my son for 19 years. "Dr. Thompson said, his voice firm, but not hostile. He was raised as an only child in a family that deeply loves him. He studies medicine at Harvard Medical School. He's in his first year. He comes home during holidays and vacations. Does he know about being adopted, I mean?" The doctor sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Yes, we told him when he was 16. It was difficult." He went through a questioning phase. "Much anger. It's natural. Does he know about me?" A long pause. "No, at least not specifically. We told him his biological mother died in childbirth, that his father was unknown, that it was a legal adoption, though informal by today's standards. We never mentioned a twin sister. I felt a pang of pain. It was as if part of my existence had been erased from the narrative, as if I were an unimportant detail. "Why didn't you tell him, Dr. Thompson leaned back, his face suddenly tired. "At the time, it seemed simpler. 2 children, 2 different families. We thought it would be easier for everyone to move forward without that connection. Perhaps we were wrong. I don't know. I want to meet him," I said with unexpected determination. "I have that right." "Yes," he agreed, surprising me. "You probably do. But Michael also has the right to decide if he wants to meet you. The right to process this information in his own time. So you'll tell him about me, I will, but I can't promise his reaction. Michael is intense, sensitive. He's at an important juncture in his life, building his future. I need to approach this properly." I nodded, understanding the paternal concern. Despite my anxiety, I exchanged information with Dr. Thompson's Chicago address, more details about Elizabeth and our birth circumstances. He promised to speak with Michael when he returned for the next holiday, 2 weeks away. "Where are you staying?" he asked, as I prepared to leave. "At a downtown inn. It's temporary, just while—" "No, you can't stay there. Come to our house. My wife Kate will be delighted to have you. She always knew about you, you know. We even discussed adopting both children, but your Aunt Emily had already become so attached to you. It was strange, hearing that in an alternative universe where Michael and I might have grown up together as siblings in that family. I appreciate the invitation, Doctor, but I don't know if it would be appropriate. I don't want to cause discomfort." "I insist. Besides, it will allow me to know my son's sister better before telling him everything. And so, that same afternoon, I moved to the Thompsons' homey, a beautiful, spacious house overlooking the sea, so different from my simple Chicago upbringing. Kate, the doctor's wife, received me with tears. "My God, you look so much like him," she said, holding my hands. "The same eyes, the same way of tilting your head." The following days were surreal. I slept in the guest room occasionally used by Michael when he returned from college. I saw photos of him growing up first day of school, graduations, birthdays. I heard stories about his childhood, his mischief, his talents. It was like getting to know him through a filter, assembling a puzzle of who he was without ever having met him. Kate showed me his room, practically untouched since he'd left for college. Medical books on shelves, a guitar in the corner. Apparently he'd inherited his biological father's musical talent swimming trophies. "He loves the sea," Kate commented as I examined a photo of him with friends at the beach. "Since childhood. It's as if he was born to live near water." I found on the shelf an album titled Michael's First Year. With Kate's permission, I leafed through, seeing his earliest photos as a baby so small, so fragile, wrapped in a blue blanket in the hospital. Emotion overwhelmed me. Siblings separated at birth. Growing up in such different worlds, in this album, I saw a photo where he must have been about 8 months old. The birthmark, Elizabeth had mentioned a small half-moon shape on his right wrist, exactly as she described. "He's always had that little mark," Kate commented, noticing my reaction. "We thought it was cute. Looks like a crescent moon, doesn't it?" I pulled up my blouse sleeve and showed her my own wrist, where an almost identical mark, just slightly lighter, marked my skin. Kate gasped, bringing her hand to her mouth. "My God, you really are." "It's incredible. We were a family split in half, separated by circumstances, necessity, decisions made in desperate moments. But we remained two sides of the same coin." Michael's return date approached, and my anxiety grew. Dr. Kim Thompson had decided to speak with him first, alone, and then, if he wanted, would introduce us. "What if he doesn't want to meet me?" I asked one night during dinner. Kate and Richard exchanged glances. "Michael is a good young man," Kate finally said. "He has an enormous heart. He might initially be confused, even angry, but he won't reject you." "I know my son. My son." The words echoed in my mind. Michael was there, sun-raised with love, educated, prepared for life. I was an intruder, suddenly arriving, disrupting this tidy narrative. The night before his arrival, sleep eluded me. I stared at the ceiling, contemplating all I wanted to say, all the questions I wanted to ask. Would he also be curious about our origins? Would he feel this inexplicable emptiness that I sometimes experienced? As if something were missing. And when tomorrow came, it brought news that changed everything again. "Michael has had an accident. Dr. Thompson entered the guest room without preamble that morning. I was still in my nightgown, hair disheveled, when I heard urgent knocking. The moment I saw his pale face, I knew something terrible had happened. What kind of accident? My voice emerged, strangled, as if someone were squeezing my throat. The car bringing him from Boston overturned on the road. There was a heavy storm last night. His words came fragmented, his breathing labored. It was the first time I'd seen this always composed man lose control. They just called from the hospital in Providence. He is... I couldn't complete the sentence. fear of pronouncing that word paralyzed me. Alive, but in serious condition. They're preparing to transfer him here. Kate is already packing. We're leaving in 15 minutes if you want to come. He didn't need to finish. In 10 minutes, I was ready, sitting in the back seat while Dr. Thompson drove in sepulchral silence, Kate beside him crying softly. The radio broadcast news about the storm that had caused several highway accidents overnight. I clutched Elizabeth's blue scarf so tightly my fingers whitened. I couldn't stop contemplating the cruel iron after such a long search for my brother. I would finally meet him in a hospital bed, perhaps unable to speak to me. How was he before the accident, I asked, trying to break that anguished silence. Did he know I was coming to meet him, Doctor? Thompson shook his head, eyes fixed on the wet road. No. We hadn't told him anything yet. He was coming home happy. He had just passed his semester exams with excellent grades. An ambulance passed us, siren wailing, and my stomach sank. I thought about Emily, about her concerns regarding my trip. Perhaps I should call her, tell her what was happening. But something prevented me. Perhaps the fear of making it all even more real by saying it aloud. We arrived at the Boston hospital before the ambulance, bringing Michael, Dr. Thompson, being a well-known physician there. Quickly obtained all information. Cranial trauma, broken ribs, possible internal hemorrhaging, serious, but with survival chances. We spent hours in the hospital waiting room. I remember the strong disinfectant smell, nurses hurrying down corridors, the pitying looks they directed at us. Kate prayed quietly, holding rosary beads between her fingers. Dr. Thompson alternated between moments of absolute silence and bursts of questions to his medical colleagues. And I could only think that my brother might leave this world without ever knowing of my existence. The ambulance arrived around noon. From the waiting room window, I saw them unload the stretcher, an unconscious young man, tubes and machines attached, bandages on his head, even from a distance, even in that state. I recognized Michael. It was like looking at a version of myself in masculine form injured, fighting for life. They didn't allow us to see him in the first few hours. He went directly to surgery. Kate experienced a fainting spell and needed medication. Dr. Thompson, using his medical authority, managed to enter the operating room once, but returned even more dejected. It's serious, was all he could say. They were the 12 longest hours of my life, sitting in that hard waiting room chair, trying to comfort Kate while suppressing my own fear. I felt more alone than ever. It was as if I were trapped in an endless nightmare. It was almost midnight when the surgeon finally appeared, still wearing his green operating uniform, looking exhausted. We've managed to stabilize him, he told Dr. Thompson, who jumped to his feet. The hemorrhaging has been controlled, but the cranial trauma is serious. We don't yet know the extent of neurological damage. Will he wake up? Kate asked, her voice trembling. The doctor hesitated. We hope so, but I can't promise when. He's in an induced coma now to reduce intracranial pressure. The next few days will be critical. Days became weeks. Michael was transferred to the ICU, where we took turns at his bedside. I settled permanently in the Thompsons' house, which had become a kind of second home. I called Emily, explaining everything. She offered to come, but I asked her to wait. We didn't know how recovery would progress or how long it would take. I pray for him every day. Emily told me on the phone. Her voice choked. For both of you, the hospital routine remained constant. We arrived early, spoke with doctors, sat beside Michael's bed for hours. The nurses regarded us curiously, probably noticing the striking resemblance between the patient and me. Nobody asked questions, but I sensed the looks, the whispers. Kate spent hours reading to Michael his favorite books, newspaper articles, anything. Dr. Thompson, leveraging his medical knowledge, monitored every treatment detail, questioning protocols, suggesting alternatives. He wasn't merely a father then, but a doctor fighting to save his son. And I simply held his hand, observing every detail of that face, so similar to Dimple. The same eyebrow lineament, talked softly, telling him about our biological mother, about Elizabeth and her blue scarf, about how we were separated at birth, and how I had spent the past year searching for him. "You need to wake up," I would say, holding his unresponsive hand. "We have so much to discuss, so many stories to share." It was during one such moment, approximately 3 weeks after the accident, that I felt a slight squeeze on my fingers, almost imperceptible, but definitely there. I looked at Michael's face and saw his eyes moving beneath his eyelids. "Dr. Kate, I think he's waking up," I shouted without releasing his hand. The doctors rushed in, asking us to leave while they conducted examinations. The minutes we spent in the corridor seemed eternal. Kate cried with joy and apprehension. Dr. Thompson paced back and forth, trying to glimpse through the door. When they finally permitted us to return, Michael's eyes were half open, confused but awake. He couldn't speak because of the tubes, but his gaze found his parents first, then wandered until resting on me. The confusion in his expression was evident. He frowned as if trying to comprehend who I was and why I was present. Dr. Thompson approached, holding his son's hand. "Michael, son, we have much to discuss when you're better. This is Sarah. She's your sister." His eyes widened, moving rapidly between me and his adoptive parents. He attempted to speak, but the tubes prevented it. A monitor beside the bed began displaying accelerated heartbeats. "Calm down. Don't strain yourself," Kate said, stroking his hair. "We'll explain everything, but now you need rest. In the following days." Michael's recovery was surprisingly rapid. The doctors removed the tubes and he began speaking first isolated words, then short sentences. Tests showed no permanent brain damage, a miracle, according to specialists. Gradually, Dr. Thompson and Kate explained the entire story about Elizabeth, about our birth, about how the families had made the difficult decision to separate us. I supplemented with my recent discoveries. Together, we reconstructed the puzzle of our origin. Michael oscillated between anger that the truth had been concealed for so long and intense curiosity, wanting to know every detail about me, about our biological mother, about the family he never knew. "Why now?" he asked one afternoon when we were alone in the room. He was already sitting up in bed, looking much better, though still weak. "Why, after so much time, did you come looking for me?" I described the family reunion, Great-Aunt Dorothy, and her revealing confusion. Elizabeth's letter from the wooden box. I showed him the blue silk scarf I carried. Our mother wore this when she sang in New York jazz clubs. I explained, extending the faded silk to him. It was like her good luck charm. Michael held the scarf carefully, as if it were a precious relic. Then, without warning, he pulled up his hospital pajama sleeve, revealing the half-moon birthmark on his wrist. "I always wondered why I had this," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Mom and Dad, Kate, and Richard always said it was just a birthmark. But now, I showed my own wrist with the identical mark. just slightly lighter. We sat there, contemplating that undeniable physical proof of our connection. "It's strange," he said finally. "I've spent my entire life feeling, I don't know, as if something were missing. When I discovered I was adopted, I thought that explained it. But maybe it was because of me." I completed, "Because of our connection." Michael smiled weakly. It was the first time I'd seen him truly smile, and I almost lost my breath at our resemblance. That was my smile reflected in his face. "Tell me more about yourself," he requested, "about your Chicago life, about her." "What do you call her, Emily?" "She raised me as her own daughter," I explained. "I only discovered the truth on my 18th birthday. But I have photos of her, of Elizabeth too. I brought them." We spent hours like this, exchanging stories, filling gaps in each other's lives. It was like making up for lost time, though we knew 19 years couldn't be condensed into a few conversations. On the day Michael was discharged from the hospital, almost a month after the accident, we made a decision. He would still need home care, physical therapy, medical monitoring, but he was out of danger. "I want to see Chicago," he told me as we waited for his parents to complete discharge paperwork. "I want to meet Emily, see where you grew up, visit our biological mother's burial place. Are you sure? Wouldn't it be better to wait until you fully recovered? Life is too short to wait." "Sarah," he pointed to the recent scar on his forehead. "I learned that the hard way. Who would have thought a near-fatal accident would finally bring us together? Life sometimes chooses strange paths to teach its lessons. When I consider everything I experienced to reach that point, the hours of searching, the solitary journey to an unknown city, and how I almost lost my brother before truly knowing him well, it makes me value even more every moment we've shared since." Dr. Thompson and Kate agreed to the trip, provided they accompanied their son. We arranged to travel as soon as Michael was strong enough for the bus journey. Probably in a few weeks. I called Emily with the news. She cried when I said Michael wanted to meet her. "I'll prepare the back room for them," she said, her voice emotional. "It's not luxurious like they're accustomed to, but—" "Mom, it's our family they want to know, not our house." It was strange how, even having discovered a new family, my bond with Emily hadn't diminished. On the contrary, meeting Michael, seeing Kate and Richard's love for him, had only increased my appreciation for Emily's sacrifice in raising me alone, without the Thompson family's resources. When I hung up, I found Michael watching me from the wheelchair he temporarily used. "It's strange hearing you call someone else." "Mom," he commented. "It's strange for me, too. For a long time, I thought she was my biological mother. Then, when I learned about Elizabeth, I was confused, even resentful. Now I understand that family is much more complex than just blood." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "I'm concerned about how it will be when we're all together. Two families that have never met, united through us. It will work out." I replied with more confidence than I felt. After all, we all want the same thing, to discover who we really are. The return trip to Chicago differed greatly from my journey there. Where before, I traveled alone. Now I had a small caravan, Michael, still recovering, but determined to make the trip. Dr. Thompson and Kate, who couldn't hide their anxiety about seeing where I grew up, and me, more nervous than ever, wondering how this meeting between the two families that formed my life would unfold. "Do you think Emily will like me?" Michael asked during the trip, adjusting the pillow supporting his still aching back. "Of course she will," I replied. trying to conceal my own insecurity. She has loved you without knowing you since learning of your existence. She hasn't stopped talking about you. The bus bounced along the road, and I observed Kate and Richard's expressions in the seats ahead. They seemed so out of place on that ordinary bus with their fine clothes and cultured manners. They came from a different world than my Nia, world of doctors and universities, comfortable homes, and planned trips. What would it be like for them to experience the simple reality where I grew up? We arrived in Chicago on a hot summer afternoon. The bus station was crowded, noisy, chaotic as always. I noticed confusion in Kate's eyes, how Dr. Thompson held his wallet more tightly, as if fearing theft. And there, amid that crowd, I distinguished Emily's familiar figure, anxiously waiting near the platform. At 60, Emily seemed to have aged about 10 years since I'd left her hair grayer, her wrinkles deeper. I realized how worrying about me had affected her during those months of separation. "Mom," I shouted, running to embrace her, momentarily forgetting we weren't alone. We hugged tightly, and I felt her tears dampening my shoulder. "My daughter, I've missed you so much," she whispered, holding me as if I might vanish if she released me. Then, slowly, her gaze lifted and rested on the group waiting several steps behind me. The moment Emily first saw Michael is something I'll never forget. It was as if she had seen a ghost. Her hand went to her mouth, her eyes widened, and briefly, I thought she might faint. "My God in heaven," she murmured, approaching slowly. "It's like seeing Elizabeth again." Michael, leaning on a temporary cane, took a hesitant step toward her. The silence between them seemed charged with decades of untold stories, of paths that might have been different. "Aunt Emily," he said finally, his voice choked. "Or can I just call you Emily?" She didn't let him finish. With a sob, she carefully embraced him, respecting his recent injuries, but full of the maternal love I knew so well. "You can call me whatever you want, my boy," she answered through tears. "Just hearing your voice is a gift I never expected to receive." I watched that scene with a shoulder. She was crying, too, probably understanding for the first time the human dimension of this entire story we had lived separately. In the following days, our small, simple house never seemed so full of life. Emily had indeed prepared the back room for Kate and Richard, cleaning, arranging, using our best linens, those reserved for important visitors. Michael stayed in my room while I slept on the living room sofa. The differences between the families were evident, but less significant than I had feared. Richard, accustomed to his position as a respected doctor, seemed somewhat out of place initially, observing our simple neighborhood with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Kate, more adaptable, was soon in the kitchen with Emily, exchanging recipes, laughing at old stories, finding a connection that transcended social differences. "Your mother is remarkable," Kate told me one of the first days as we helped prepare dinner. "Raised you alone, worked so hard. I can't imagine how difficult it must have been. Emily had to work and care for me simultaneously." I explained, recalling my childhood. I remember her sewing until late after I had gone to bed. Sometimes I would wake up, and she was still at the singer machine, nearly dozing from exhaustion, but persisting to finish urgent orders. Richard and I had it easier, certainly, Kate admitted, looking out the window to where men were talking in the yard. But we never took that privilege for granted. We tried to teach Michael to value every opportunity, and you succeeded admirably, I replied sincerely. "He's a wonderful person, In the days that followed, we pieced together the loose fragments of our lives. Michael and I spent hours comparing our childhoods, discovering surprising similarities despite growing up in such different environments. We both feared thunderstorms as children. We both enjoyed drawing, though he pursued medicine while I worked in a shop. We both had a similar laugh that moved Emily whenever she heard it. It's Elizabeth's laugh, she told us one night as we examined old photos. She laughed exactly like that, tilting her head back slightly, just as you both do. One afternoon, I took Michael to the cemetery where Elizabeth was buried. Emily accompanied us, but remained at a distance, giving us space for that moment. The tombstone was simple, just her name and the dates, 1938, 1957. So young. Michael knelt with difficulty due to his injuries, still recovering, and placed the flowers we had brought. We remained silent for a long time, each contemplating the woman who had given us life, but whom we never had the opportunity to know. What do you think she would say if she could see us now? Michael asked softly. I think she would be happy that we're together, I replied, holding his hand, even if it took so long. That night, back at Emily's house, we found Kate and Richard looking at old photographs with Emily. They had brought an album from Boston with Michael's childhood photos, and now they were comparing them with my childhood pictures. Look at this, Richard commented when we entered, pointing to two photos side by side. One showed Michael at about 5 years old, dressed as a doctor for carnival. The other was me at the same age, also in costume, but as a nurse. Even without knowing each other, they followed similar paths. And did you see this? Kate added, showing two other photos where we both had the same grumpy expression in front of a plate of food. Identical. We laughed at those coincidences, marveling at the invisible ties that seemed to have connected us across distance and time. It was during this Chicago stay that Michael and I decided to investigate more about our biological father, David. Emily had limited information. She knew only that he was a musician, played guitar in a band that performed in New York bars in the 1950s. According to her, when Elizabeth discovered her pregnancy, he had already disappeared for a few weeks, supposedly for a tour in the Southeast. Elizabeth waited almost a month, thinking he would return. Emily told us, when she realized she had truly been abandoned, she was already more than 4 months pregnant. That's when she wrote me that first letter asking for help. Michael, educated in medicine but with impressive investigative curiosity, suggested we consult old newspapers. If he performed in bars, perhaps there are advertisements, mentions in society columns from that period. And so we began another search, now together. At the municipal library, we spent entire days consulting microfilms of 1950s New York newspapers. The name of David's band, the Night Owls, appeared several times in small nightclub advertisements. It was in a March 1st, 1956 newspaper that we found the first photograph for young men with musical instruments, smiling in front of a jazz bar called Midnight Blue. David's name was in the caption, identifying the guitarist on the right. It's him, Michael whispered, pointing to the dark-haired, wide-smiling young man. There's something in the eyes, they look like mine. It was true. Even in that low-quality black-and-white photo, we could see that Michael had inherited his father's eyes, while I seemed to have Elizabeth's another piece of the puzzle fitting into place. But news about the Night Owls stopped abruptly in mid-1956. We found no further mention of the band or David in subsequent newspapers. It's as if they vanished, I commented, frustrated after another day of fruitless searching. It was Richard who suggested the next clue. If they performed regularly in these bars, someone must remember them. Some of these establishments might still exist, or perhaps older musicians from the New York scene. The idea was good, but it would require a trip to New York City, and with Michael still recovering, that wouldn't be possible immediately. "We'll do this when I'm completely recovered," he promised. "We'll go together to New York, follow their trail. Who knows? We might discover what happened to our biological father." During those 3 weeks, the Thompson family spent in Chicago, something unexpected happened. The two parts of my life, so different, began to intertwine in surprising ways. Richard, the respected doctor, began helping some sick neighbors for free. Kate taught embroidery techniques to Emily, who in turn showed her sewing secrets that could enhance her volunteer work in Boston. And Michael won everyone's heart with his kindness and genuine curiosity about the simple life I had always known. Friends who have shared many experiences together have a beautiful expression for this. It was our shared story. Our families were creating a story together, and it wasn't about wealth or education. It was about people whom fate had separated and who were now trying to build bridges over lost years. One night, a few days before the Thompson family was to return to Boston, we were all sitting on Emily's small porch. The Chicago summer heat was beginning to subside. A gentle breeze swayed clothes on the line. Michael, now walking without a cane but still moving cautiously, played the guitar, another talent we discovered we shared, though he played much better than I did. "Elizabeth loved this song," Emily commented when he began strumming No More Blues. "How did you know?" Michael smiled, that smile so similar to mine. "I didn't. I guess it's in the blood." And it was in that simple moment, under the stars of an ordinary Chicago night, that I felt we were finally complete. Not because we had found all the answers we still needed to discover what had happened to David. There were still stories to unravel, but because for the first time, I had all parts of my identity gathered in one place. My past, my present, and the promise of a future where we would no longer need to live with secrets. Life after that meeting was never the same. When the Thompson family returned to Boston, they took a piece of my heart with them. Michael had promised to return once fully recovered, so we could continue our search for our biological father. And this time, I wouldn't be so anxious about the separation. Knowing our bond was now too strong to be broken by distance, Emily had also changed. It was as if an enormous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The secret she had carried for so many years was no longer a shadow in our relationship. For the first time, I saw my adoptive mother truly free, at peace with the past. "You know, daughter," she told me a few days after the Thompsons left, "I was always afraid you would hate me when you discovered the truth, that you would feel I had stolen you from your true family." "How could I hate you?" I replied, holding her wrinkled hands. "You are the reason I'm alive, the reason I had a happy childhood despite all difficulties. And now you have 2 families." She smiled. "More people to love you. That's how it should have been from the beginning." Michael returned to Chicago 3 months later, completely recovered. This time, he came alone, with tickets already purchased for our New York City trip. The search for David, our biological father, had become an important mission for both of us, not from resentment or demand, but from a genuine desire to complete our story. "What will we do if we find him?" I asked the night before our trip, as we packed. Michael reflected for a moment. "I don't know exactly. I'm not expecting an emotional embrace or an apology. I just want to see his face, know if he's alive, understand why he did what he did, and if he doesn't want to know us, then we'll have our answer. won't we? At least, we won't spend the rest of our lives imagining how it might have been. New York City in 1958 was a city in transformation, bossa nova. On radios, modern buildings emerging, and optimism in the air that contrasted with the simplicity of Chicago I knew. We stayed in a modest inn in Greenwich Village, conserving the money we had gathered for our investigation. Our first stop was the Midnight Blue Jazz Bar mentioned in old newspaper clippings. To our surprise, it still existed, although renamed New Dawn. The current owner knew nothing about the night owls, but directed us to an old employee who might help old Jack, a gentleman nearly 80 who had worked as a bartender since the 1940s. He received us with initial suspicion, but when we explained who we were, his eyes brightened with recognition. David Almeida. Of course I remember. That young man played guitar like nobody else, and the girl who sometimes sang with them. What was her name again? He frowned, straining his memory. Elizabeth, I suggested, feeling a chill in my stomach. That's right, Elizabeth, voice of an angel. That girl, and a blue scarf she wore around her neck. I remember as if it were yesterday. Michael and I exchanged emotional glances. It confirmed we were on the right track. What happened to them? Mr. Jack, why did the band stop playing? The old bartender sighed, scratching his bald head. It was a sad story. They were becoming successful, starting to play in better venues, earned decent money, until a manager appeared offering a southeastern tour. A golden opportunity, they said. They left full of dreams. And then, the tragedy. The bus carrying them and their instruments overturned on a North Carolina road. 2 died instantly. The other 2 were badly injured. It shocked everyone here. I felt my blood freeze. Did David survive? Yes, but he was badly injured. Spent months in the hospital. When he returned, he wasn't the same anymore. The handsaw guitarist's hands are his greatest treasure. You understand, and his were compromised. He could never play like before again. The story was beginning to make sense. David, young, full of dreams, seeing his musical career destroyed by an accident. Elizabeth, pregnant, waiting for a love that wouldn't return. Do you know where he went afterward? Michael asked, his voice emotional. Old Jack pondered a moment. He stayed around here a few months, trying to recover, drinking excessively, beside himself. Later, I heard he returned to his hometown. Where was it again? Yes, Rochester, New York. He had family there, from what I recall. It was like a ray of light after so much darkness, a specific city. A concrete lead. We thanked the old bartender effusively, who seemed pleased to have helped, and returned to the inn to reconsider our plans. Rochester, Michael repeated enthusiastically. It's close to New York. We can go immediately. But something inside me had changed with that revelation. For the first time since beginning our search, I truly understood what had happened. He didn't know, I said quietly, sitting on the bed's edge. David never knew Elizabeth was pregnant. When the accident happened, when he finally returned to New York after months in the hospital, she had already left for Chicago with Emily. Michael sat beside me, absorbing this possibility. So our father... He didn't intentionally abandon us. He simply didn't know we existed. It was a revelation that changed everything. The image of the irresponsible father who fled responsibility transformed into that of a young musician whose life was shattered by tragedy, and who never had the chance to know he would become a father. We returned to Chicago with this new perspective, and a week later, we were on a train to Rochester. The city was larger than expected, and the surname Almeida was quite common. We spent days searching phone books, inquiring in musicians' bars, visiting registries for records. It was on a hot Saturday afternoon that we finally had luck. Speaking with a music store owner, we mentioned David Almeida's name and his history with the Night Owls. David Almeida, the music teacher. The man asked, surprised? He gives lessons nearby, at Lincoln Community School. He doesn't perform publicly anymore, hasn't for years, but he teaches children. He's a reserved, somewhat solitary man. I froze, unsure how to react, after so much searching. He was there, just blocks away alive. Real. Where can we find him? Michael asked, always more practical than me. He should be at the school today. They have weekend music classes for interested students. It's that yellow building at the end of the main avenue. We walked silently to the school, each absorbed in thought. What would we say? How would he react? Was it too late to repair so many lost years? The school was nearly empty at that hour. Just a few staff members and students. We followed guitar music coming from a room at the corridor's end. The door was ajar, and through the crack, we saw a man with his back to us, completely gray-haired, sitting in a simple chair, playing for a small group of children watching attentively. Despite the hand limitations old Jack mentioned, he still played with feeling. He wasn't a virtuoso, but there was soul in that music. The children smiled. Some tried to follow along, clapping to the rhythm. We waited for the class to end, hearts racing. When the last student left, Michael glanced at me as if asking if I was ready. I nodded, gathering all my courage. We knocked. The man, still with his back to us, arranging sheet music, answered without turning. I'm leaving now. You can clean the room. Mr. David Almeida. Michael called, his voice trembling. He turned slowly. He was a man of about 55, with deep wrinkles speaking of much suffering, but with eyes identical to Michael's. For a moment, he observed us, confused, probably noticing our resemblance. Yes, he replied cautiously. How can I help you? Michael stepped forward. My name is Michael. This is my sister Sarah. We are Elizabeth's children. The guitar slipped from his hands, falling with a dull thud. His face paled, and briefly, I thought he might faint. Elizabeth, he whispered, as if the name burned his throat. But that's impossible. You twins, I explained, my voice almost gone. We were born in December 1957. Our mother didn't survive childbirth. David stumbled to a chair, collapsing into it. Tears flowed freely down his weathered face. I didn't know, he murmured, his trembling hands covering his face. I swear to God I didn't know. The accident, I spent months hospitalized. When I returned to New York, I searched for her, but she had vanished. Nobody could tell me where she had gone. We approached slowly, like someone approaching a wounded animal. We're not here to blame you, sir, Michael said gently. We just wanted to find you, meet you, understand our history. David looked at us for a long time, as if trying to memorize every detail of our faces. Then, slowly, he extended his hands marked by old scars, deformed by the accident toward us. My children, he said, his voice choked. My children whom I never knew existed. Folks, there are things in life that we wait for so long, imagine in so many different ways, that when they finally happen, they seem unreal. Meeting my biological father was like that. Not even in my most optimistic dreams would I have imagined that David had also suffered, had also searched, had also carried an emptiness he could never explain. If this story touches you somehow, if you're seeking answers about your own past or trying to reconcile different parts of your life, I want to tell you, don't give up. The truth may take time. It may hurt, but it can also heal wounds you didn't even know you had. The months that followed were of reconnection. David met Emily, then the Thompsons. Stories were shared, explanations given, forgiveness granted. It wasn't always easy. There were old hurts, misunderstandings, occasional jealousies, but there was also a genuine desire from everyone to make it work, to fill the gaps of lost years. David never remarried after Elizabeth. I never found anyone who made me feel what I felt with her. He told us one night, as we examined old photos, "Your mother was pure light. When I learned she was gone, part of me died with her." Michael eventually completed medical school and began working with his adoptive father. I remained in Chicago, but visited Boston frequently. David retired a few years later and moved to Chicago to be closer to me and Emily, whom he came to deeply admire for the sacrifice of raising the daughter of his beloved Elizabeth. Years passed. Life took its course. Emily left us in 1983 at 85, having lived long enough to see her 2 grandchildren. Michael's children, with his wife Jennifer, grow up. Kate and Richard lived to know their great-grandchildren, always maintaining that special connection formed during our first meeting in Chicago. David passed away in 1991 peacefully, having rebuilt his life around the family he discovered late. His final gift to us was a composition, played with difficulty on his limited hands, called Elizabeth and the Twins, a simple but deeply moving melody that Michael and I still play on special occasions. Now, at 82, when I look back, I realize that the secrets I once feared turned out to be the very threads that wove the tapestry of my life. Every discovery, every hidden truth, every unexpected reunion stitched itself into the person I became. If you were to ask me whether I wish I had known everything from the start, I'm not sure I could give you an answer. Life reveals its mysteries in its own time, and perhaps everything unfolded exactly as it was meant to. What I do know is this: that sweltering summer day when Great-Aunt Dorothy pointed to Elizabeth's photograph and said I looked just like my mother wasn't an endangit, was a beginning. A new chapter, larger than I could have imagined. Story of separations and reunions, of secrets laid bare, of love wearing many faces, each one just as real and powerful as the next. Michael, of course, is 82 now as well. He still lives in Boston, surrounded by children and grandchildren, a full life pulsing around him. We speak almost every day and spend at least a month together each year, alternating between my quiet home in Chicago and his house near the sea. Time hasn't worn down our bond. If anything, it has tempered and deepened it, like a fine wine growing richer with every passing season. Sometimes, when we sit side by side on his porch, gazing at the endless blue, or in my garden under the climbing rose seeds seem unnecessary. We simply are, 2 halves of a whole that destiny once tried to divide, but that somehow, miraculously, found their way back to one another. And isn't that the extraordinary part of any story? Not the heartbreak, not the secrets, not even the revelations, but the simple, profound truth that some connections are unbreakable, like the invisible thread tying twins across time and distance, even before they ever know it. If there is one lesson these 82 years have given me, it's this: never stop seeking your truth. It might be tucked inside a dusty album, hidden in an old wooden box in an attic, or marked by a tiny half-moon birthmark on someone's wrist. But when you find Ito, when you find it suddenly, the whole story makes sense.